All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm Megan Hutchinson, and I'm joined by Carolyn Hare. I'm going to kick off our session by talking about our GRICON study that we have conducted as a part of CureGrin's research efforts. This is our first kind of independent research project that we've held on our own. And so I'm excited to be able to share a little bit of the preliminary results with you all today. So, a little bit of an introduction of some terms that we want to talk about today. Mortality is defined as the number of deaths in a certain period of time from a certain group of people. This can be different demographics, this can be from a different disease state, it can be from different ethnicities. And then the definition for life expectancy is the measure of the average time a person is expected to live. And this varies by region. In the US, it's currently estimated at 77.5 years. This is the estimate by the CDC. And so I also wanted to talk about some previous studies that have been conducted by other rare disease organizations as well as other disease states. So Dravet syndrome, there was a research study that was conducted last year. These were individuals that had confirmed SCN1A variants. And this was hosted with the Residra's registry. I believe this entire group's an Italian group. And so this is an Italian registry. Most of the patients within this registry have epilepsy data, meaning that they might have EEGs or other measures to assess seizure activity. During the 7-year activity of this registry, they found that 5 patients died, and this resulted in a mortality rate of 1.84 per 1,000 person years. So with mortality rate data, that the calculation is made per 1,000 person years. So that's just for 1,000 individuals involved in this study. The mortality rate would be 1.84. And so the Yan et al. Study was also conducted last year. Here we had 388 patients. This was an autopsy-based study. So there were postmortem findings that they were looking for in each of these cases. They saw that there were some neurological changes in over half of the cases that they looked at. There was also cerebral swelling or edema and congestion in about 15% of cases. There was evidence of previous traumatic brain injury in about 14.9% of cases. They also saw cardiac pathology as well as pulmonary edema in many of these cases as well. So just to give you a sense of some of the things that is seen in other conditions related to mortality. Additionally, there was the first case identifying a large group of patients with GRIA2 variants was reported in 2019. There were 2 GRIA2 cases within that study. Both had a PA639S variant, and both of those resulted in epileptic encephalopathy and death in infancy. So there was sudden unexplained death in infancy, or SUDEP, were considered the cause of death in both of those cases. So those were the GRIA variants that have been reported. We will not be talking about any GRIA variants in this study. We haven't been in contact with any families that have responded to our survey or interviews with GRIA variants. And so for our GRIAngels, we know of 24 deaths that have been shared with us since 2019. This is usually very informal. If you had seen our GRIAngels video, that's something that we're also going to be sharing today to honor our GRIAngels. But this is something that we've learned more and more about, and we've heard of more kids passing away of different complications related to GRIA disorders. And so we wanted to better understand the cause of death. And so some of those families have shared that with us. And so the most common cause of death that's been reported was respiratory complications. Some other reported causes of death were seizures and epilepsy, choking, suffocation, cardiac arrest, aspiration pneumonia, sepsis, SIDS or sudden infant death syndrome, and mitochondrial disease. And this is kind of an outlook of what our GRIAngels look like in terms of the number of genes and variants that we've seen. So this is overall, including all of those 24 patients. Not all of those have participated in this study, which I'll talk more about. But we know of 13 cases where a child had a variant in GRIN1 who have passed away, 4 females and 9 males. For GRIN2A, we know of 4 cases, 2 females, 2 males. For GRIN2B, also 4 cases, 1 female, 3 males. And for GRIN2D, there have been 2 cases and 2 females reported. So this led us to conduct our CureGrid mortality study. So we wanted to better understand the answers to these questions below. So we wanted to understand, are there certain symptoms or comorbidities that can lead to early death or result in death related to GRICON disorders? Are there certain types of variants, such as gain of function or loss of function, that might lead to an increased risk of death? Are there common causes of death that have been reported in our community? And what steps can we take as a patient community to raise awareness about various symptoms and comorbidities in order to improve disease management and health outcomes? And so CureGrin conducted this interview and survey study in partnership with Combined Brain with families who had reported a death of a loved one with a GRICON variant. And we received regulatory approval from the North Star Review Board. So this was conducted under an IRB. All of the data has been safely protected and is GDPR compliant. And so far we have had 11 respondents. So you might remember that I talked about there being 24 cases that we're aware of. We had 11 respondents in this survey. So that's the data that we're going to be talking about today. So the methods for this project, all of the participants were consented with an informed consent process. We collected genetic reports so we could verify various variants that had been reported by families. Medical records were available, and then there were the interview and survey questions. So for most of the families, they completed the interview process. So this was about an hour and a half long interview. And other families that had language differences or couldn't find a time to meet, we had some families respond by survey to the exact same questions that were asked in the interview format. And some of the questions that we wanted answers for were demographics, if there were any pregnancy or birth complications, what was the genetic variant, if this case was de novo, meaning that it was a new variant and hadn't been reported in either of the parents, if confirmation testing was done, if there were any challenges with vision or hearing, if there were changes in startle behavior, pain differences, so if they felt pain more so or less so than other children, if there are any behavioral challenges. We also wanted to get a sense of what the patient's personality was like, what their general demeanor was. We wanted to also understand if there were any abnormal results on medical tests, such as MRI or EEG or any other lab results that might have been abnormal. And additionally, we wanted to understand medications that had been tried, family history of any illnesses. And then for the mortality focused questions, we wanted to understand the date of the child's passing, the reported cause of death by the care team or on the death certificate, the location of death, whether that was at home, under palliative care conditions, if there were any changes in symptoms leading up to the child's passing, what the events of the days leading up to the child's death looked like. Also, we wanted to understand if families felt that their child's health was in decline and they were aware that their child's passing might be imminent, or if their child's passing was very unexpected and they didn't foresee that coming, and if there were any interventions tried at the end of life. So for our preliminary results related to GRIN1, we had 6 respondents out of the 11 had variants in GRIN1, and we can see here what those variants were. Most of them were missense. There was one likely loss of function variant that has been categorized by CFIRV in this group of patients. And there were 3 either likely or possible gain of functions reported. And there were some overlap in terms of the location of some of those variants. So we see that the M3 domain came up a couple of times. So we want to better understand more about what that means if there's a variant located in one particular location. And so in terms of what the demographics of this group look like, the youngest patient reported was 3 years old, with the oldest being 23 years old. And there were 5 males reported and 1 female. A lot of the symptoms overlap with many of the symptoms that we see in our patient population: developmental delay, intellectual disability, epilepsy, seizures, GI issues, neurostorms, or paroxysmal sympathetic hyperactivity. Nonverbal communication, many of these things we've heard about throughout our patient community. So it was interesting to see that that's also true here. There wasn't anything that really stood out in terms of symptoms experienced. Moreover, for the causes of death reported either on the death certificate or what the family reported as the cause of death by the care team, we see that for the first case, who was a 19-year-old male, choking, traumatic brain injury, and seizure were the reported causes of death. Another thing we wanted to ask families was what did they consider the cause of death? And so for this particular family, they said that they felt that it was a comorbidity from choking, seizure, lack of oxygen, and brain injury. In the second case, we had a 10-year-old male. The cause of death reported was cardiopulmonary arrest with complications of GRIN1 disorder. And the family felt that their child was healthy before. They were unsure what to consider the cause of death. For the 23-year-old female patient, the cause of death reported was cerebral palsy, and the family reported that they felt the cause of death was that they had stopped eating. So there was a nutritional issue there. In the case with the 3-year-old male, the reported cause of death was acute respiratory failure, and the survey respondent felt that GRIN disorder with respiratory issues was the leading cause of death. In a 4-year-old, 3.5-month-old male, epilepsy was the reported cause of death, and the family felt that tracheomalacia and that their child could not breathe was leading to the cause of death. In the 7-year-old male case, the reported causes of death on the death certificate were cardiac arrest, intracerebral hemorrhages, respiratory failure, severe electrolyte derangements, and the survey respondent did not respond in terms of what they considered the cause of death. So for GRIN2A, we only had one respondent out of our 11 respondents. They did not provide a genetic report yet, so we don't have a confirmed variant for this patient, but they were 11 years old, female with developmental delay, intellectual disability, epilepsy, mixed tone, GI issues, nonverbal communication, and the causes of death reported were SUDEP, pneumonia, cardiac arrest from bacteremia, so just a bacterial infection that had taken over the body, and they've said that also the child was vulnerable as a result of the GRIN2A variant. And the survey respondent felt that the cause of death was cardiac arrest from bacteremia. So for GRIN2B, there were 2 variants reported, both missense. One of them considered a possible loss of function by CFIRV functional analysis. This was a 3-year-old male who experienced developmental delay. They were nonverbal, had hypotonia, scoliosis. They also experienced GERD, hyperemesis, constipation, among other issues. And the second patient was an 18-year-old, 9-month-old male who experienced developmental delay, intellectual disability, hypotonia, CVI, constipation, and refractory epilepsy. And the cause of death reported for the first 3-year-old male case was a chromosomal abnormality. And this was another variant that was reported, as well as nutritional. And the survey respondent considered the cause of death to be nutritional, considering that their child had stopped feeding or stopped eating. The 18-year-old, 9-month-old male, the causes of death reported were GRIN2B, pneumonia, and septic shock. And they felt that they agreed with what the medical team had deemed as the reported cause of death. So for GRIN2D, we had 2 variants reported. They were both missense variants that haven't been functionally characterized, and both of them are located in a region of the protein called the C-terminal domain. And a lot of variants haven't been characterized in this domain, so we hope to learn more about these 2 variants in particular. And these were both female patients. One was 3 years, 5 months old, and the other was 11 months old. The first patient experienced developmental delay, intellectual disability, epilepsy, seizures, hypotonia, retinal dystrophy, blindness, photophobia, hearing loss, and cerebral palsy. The second patient experienced microcephaly and Ohtahara syndrome, which is a epilepsy seizure phenotype. Moreover, the cause of death reported for the first patient was GRIN2D. They said that it was related to GRIN2D. This patient actually also underwent palliative care measures, so they were in hospice at the time of passing. And the survey respondent considered the cause of death to be GRIN2D, that their child had suffered for over 20 months and was very ill. And the 11-month-old female patient experienced pneumonia, and the cause of death was COVID-19 with pneumonia. And the survey respondent felt that the cause of death was the severity of their Ohtahara syndrome, that they were very sick from the seizures that their child was experiencing. So overall, we found that developmental delay, intellectual disability, epilepsy and seizures, hypotonia, many of the symptoms that we see throughout our patient community were also seen in these cases. And one of the questions that we really wanted to understand from the respondents were if they were aware that their child's health was in decline, or was their child's passing unexpected. And 8 out of the 11 respondents, or 72%, said that their child's passing was unexpected. And 3 out of the 11 said that their child's health was in decline. One child, as previously mentioned, were undergoing palliative care measures. So it seems that overall the passing of their child has been very unexpected, that there wasn't any obvious changes leading up to their passing that led them to believe that that was going to happen soon. And the common biological systems that were involved in the cause of death reported were cardiac, respiratory, and neurological, which we've went over in the last few slides. And so the conclusions that we've garnered so far from this project are that people with GRICON disorders may be at a higher risk of early mortality. Respiratory complications are the leading cause of GRICON-related death that we know of. Other risks include epilepsy and seizures, cardiac arrest, and choking. We think that people with GRIN1 variants might be at a higher risk, considering the number of GRIN1 cases that have been reported to us and responded in this survey. And people with GRIN2D variants may also be at a higher risk because there's a much smaller patient population that we know of GRIN2D variants. Currently in the registry, there's about 20, so there's not a ton of GRIN2D variants that have been characterized and identified so far. So potentially there could also be an increased risk there. And additionally, most of these deaths are unexpected. So these were things that, more or less came out of the blue for these families, and they didn't see that it was coming. So some of our recommendations as a result of this project are to really look out for respiratory illnesses, cold, flu, COVID-19, RSV. Be sure to take the extra precautions that needed to be taken, understand the symptoms of respiratory infections, take them seriously, wash hands, all of the different recommendations that you hear from clinicians during cold and flu season, but really to be sure to take those precautions when you have children with GRICON disorders. Also to monitor seizure activity. This is something working with your care team, making sure that the seizure meds are working effectively or trying to find alternatives if your child is having refractory seizures. Also knowing choking first aid and being sure to work closely with your doctors and your care team to address any concerns that you have related to your child's illness. So future directions of this project, we want to continue the data analysis. I talked about lots of the different questions that we ask, and we only went over a few of the results here today. We also plan to submit a manuscript for peer review related to this data, and to be able to, as a result of that, develop educational materials in order to improve clinical care and patient outcomes, and hopefully be able to find treatments and cures for GRICON disorders and prevent future deaths of patients with GRICON variants. And I wanted to take this time to thank several people that have been involved in this project. Particularly, my first and foremost thank you are to the family participants. This was very difficult. Some of these interviews were an hour and a half to 2 hours long, and it was very hard for families to be able to share what those last moments looked like. And but many of them also found that it was valuable to be able to honor their child and help other families and honor their legacy in that way. I also want to thank Dr. Anna Falzer from Combined Brain, who served as the principal investigator for this project. She was very instrumental in helping us get this project off the ground, developing questions, developing our patient response portal that we used with REDCap in order to store all of this data. I also want to thank Rachel Heilman from Combined Brain, who was involved with the data storage related to this project, Sasha, who was helpful with coordinating all of the Zooms, and Keith, who provided a lot of the feedback related to this project as well. And I really want to thank all of our families for your donations to Cure GRIN. That's what made this work possible. This is something that has been ongoing. We first heard about deaths beginning in 2019 when Cure GRIN was founded, and we wanted to better understand what was going on. And without your help and your support through donations, we wouldn't have been able to conduct this study. So we thank you for that. And lastly, I wanted to share our GRICON Angels video just to honor all of the children that have passed away from GRICON disorders. I thank you all for your time and attention. This is obviously a very difficult topic, and we love your children so much, and we know that you all do too. And we want to prevent future deaths, but we also want to honor the legacy of the children that we have lost too soon to GRICON disorder. So thank you very much, and I'm gonna share the video now. Thank you all for your time and attention. I'm now going to transition things over to Carolyn, and then we'll be able to take questions. And after her talk, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have about the study. And Carolyn will also be happy to answer any questions that you have about Autism BrainNet and brain donation. One thing that I didn't mention in my presentation is we actually had a patient in this study who has a sample with Autism BrainNet that we hope that at some point we will be able to find someone to access and be able to better understand some of the pathology from that collection, so we can understand if there were any changes in the brain or from that tissue that was collected. So handing it over to you, Carolyn. Thank you.
Megan, thank you so much. And honestly, thank you for such an informative and compassionate presentation. It was just incredibly interesting, and I hope provides a lot of insight to support your community moving forward. I also want to thank GRICON for having me here today. It's a real pleasure to be able to share information about our program, and I look forward to answering questions that you have at the end.
And Carolyn, if you could just click swap displays, please, so we can see your slides full screen. Thank you.
How's that?
That works. Thank you very much.
Better? All right. I think my notes may have disappeared, so I hope you'll forgive me if I stumble over my words at certain points. So at any rate, I'm here to share a little bit of information about Autism BrainNet, the importance of postmortem brain tissue donation, and also about what constitutes, I guess, or what sort of requirements we have for folks to become donors to our program. Talk a little bit about the donation process, and importantly, our donor family aftercare program, as well as resources that we have available for families who are thinking long term and wanting to do some long-term care planning. So to begin, our program was founded in 2014 and actually includes the Autism Tissue Program, which is a legacy program that was started in the late 1990s. And the reason that Autism BrainNet was founded sort of on the heels of the Autism Tissue Program is that there was such interest and continues to be such interest by researchers in looking at postmortem brain tissue, but there wasn't enough tissue available to satisfy the needs. And so when Autism BrainNet was started, it was to improve, increase the quantity and of course the quality of tissue available for researchers. And since our inception, and I'll share a little bit more about our donations in a minute, we have been able to collect more than 300 donations from just incredibly generous, forward-thinking families. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So our program is consists of 3 active sites: Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, the UC Davis Mind Institute in Sacramento, and also UT Southwestern in Dallas. We have 2 international repositories, one at Douglas Bell in Montreal, the other in Oxford. And we also have a really special collection known as the Autism Celoidin Library, and that is housed at the Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York. And so I just wanted to share with you, this is our whole team. I think many of our community members interact with just a select few of us from Autism BrainNet, but there's actually quite a lot of us involved in carrying out this important work. In addition to the team that I just shared with you, it goes beyond our sort of Autism BrainNet staff to include our community partners like CureGrin and the Grin2B Foundation. We rely so heavily on our community partners to be well educated about the importance of postmortem brain donation, as well as the donation process. But I hope that in kind that we are providing back, not just relying on our partners to be well educated about our program, but that we are in turn providing an important service and support as your community needs it. So why is postmortem brain tissue donation really important? And the short answer is that it is because it is the brain that is the primary organ that's affected by all neurodevelopmental conditions. So tissue-based research, along with other approaches, so imaging, EEGs, can contribute to the discovery of biomarkers, identifying therapeutic targets, all with an eye toward improving quality of life for folks. And I think we look toward progress in Alzheimer's disease, Huntington's, Parkinson's as evidence for what can be achieved in researching autism-related neurodevelopmental and genetic conditions. And importance. And I just wanted to point this out here because there's not a really good natural opportunity to do it in the coming slides. But it's very important for folks to know that brain donation is not part of most organ donation registries. It's a distinctly separate process. And so anyone who's interested in brain donation has to make a separate and distinct effort for brain donation. Okay, so thinking about who is eligible to be a donor to our program, for anyone with a diagnosis of autism or a genetic diagnosis like the GRIN disorders, there are really no exclusions. But we also are importantly looking for control donors for comparative analyses. And so for our control donors, we're looking for folks that don't have any neurologic or psychiatric condition who are up to age 50. Beyond that, there are certain ages that we can still include. So it's important if anyone you know is interested in donation to call us and to screen for eligibility. So to date, and we were just talking about this, we have a little over 360 donors to our program. And one of the things that I'll just sort of insert here is that of those families, we have built relationships and stay in touch with them and know most of them by name because their decision to become, for their person to become a donor to our program is an important one, and we do our best to honor every single family's decision to donate. Of the donations that have been made to date, you can see they're fairly evenly split between donors who have a diagnosis of autism and our quote unquote neurotypical or control donors. We also have 39 donors that have a rare genetic condition on that Spark gene list that I referenced earlier, who do not have a co-occurring autism diagnosis. And I will just say for the 130 donors that have a primary diagnosis of autism, for our purposes, many of them do also have a rare genetic condition, including Prader-Willi syndrome, Rett syndrome, et cetera, et cetera. So in terms of the actual donation process, we do our level best to make things as simple for families as possible, given the circumstances and everything else that is happening at the time of a death. The most important first step is to call our toll-free hotline. We are available 24/7 on that helpline, and we will work with you to walk through the authorization process. We will then work behind the scenes to coordinate the recovery, postmortem brain tissue recovery, and have the donation transported safely to one of the 3 sites here in the states that I mentioned earlier, so in California, Massachusetts, or in Texas. Many of our families are happy for us to sort of coordinate recovery behind the scenes. Some of our families also want to be integrally involved in that process. We are here to support whatever process is best for the family at that point in time. It is important to point out that there is no cost associated with donation to our program at all. And also, being a brain donor does not interfere with a family's funeral plans, including having a viewing. So one of the things that we do that we have implemented in an effort to continue to care for our donor families is the Donor Family Aftercare Program. This is completely voluntary. If there is a family that has made the decision to donate and then needs to move on, this we don't impose this on anyone, but we do like to stay engaged with our families when it's something that they find helpful or supportive. So each of our donor families on an annual basis receives a card from us and a token of remembrance to honor their person. We do also offer the opportunity for families to honor their person on our Memories of Hope page, which is sort of our online space for people to post pictures and words about their person. We, of course, offer condolences and ongoing contact with our program. Many of our families also actually choose to volunteer with our program over time and participate in walks or in interviews or just advocacy regarding postmortem brain tissue for research. And so we spoke at the very top of this presentation about resources for families who are considering donation as part of their long-term care planning. So for families that are interested, we are glad to provide you with any number of resources or documents that you can include in your long-term care planning packet. That can include our brain donor card. It's a little wallet card that you can keep on your person or share with people that you love, that, to let them know that you are interested or intend to become a brain donor. We, of course, have a quarterly newsletter that you can subscribe to and learn about the progress with our program. More importantly, and then, of course, all of our documents point you toward that 24/7 helpline that we were talking about before. And actually, as Megan mentioned earlier, many of our families, as they participate in our program, find such comfort and solace in being able to continue to talk about their person and honor their legacy. And so I wanted to share with you just a few quotes from some of our donor families that have, that have appreciated the process. And I'll turn it back over to Megan to lead us in Q&A. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. I don't see any questions in the chat at this point. If anybody would like to ask a question about the study or what Autism BrainNet does and what a donation process looks like, if you can put that in the chat, that would be great.
We've done such an effective job, Megan, of conveying the information.
Don't see anything yet. Here we go. An idea of the kinds of experiments that could possibly be performed related to, I guess, pathology experiments with brain donation.
Sure. So I'm really glad that you asked the question, and I'm just going to confess from the outset that I am not the scientist of the group, but I will share with you one study that resonated with me, which has to do with the density of neurons in the amygdala, and what was discovered is that the density of neurons in the amygdala of people with autism was extraordinarily heightened in kids with autism versus folks that are neurotypical. And then there's a period of time where that density sort of is more in keeping with a neurotypical person, and then later in life the density falls sharply away. And so as a former special education teacher, what that tells me is that there's opportunity for lifelong learning, that anxiety is heightened, especially in our little kiddos, because of the density of the neurons. That fight or flight reflex is heightened in our kids. It's evidenced in the structure of the brain. So that's something that we could not have seen pre-mortem.
That makes sense. Also, we've been in contact with a pathologist, in terms of possibly accessing the sample that we know of, from a child who passed away with GRIN1. And that pathologist has done experiments looking at various samples from fetal tissue. So that's something that I can forward you the research on, Ian, afterwards. But she also presented at our conference last year and talked a little bit about that project. So we're hoping to try to find out more and see if she's able to access that sample and conduct some of those studies using that precious tissue.
Thank you. That was a good question.
Any other questions?
Megan, I have a quick question for you, actually. So in your presentation, in working with 11 of the 24 families that you know of who have lost someone, is there an effort to try to reach the other 13 families, or have they said that they're not interested in participating? Can you help me understand a little bit about that?
Sure. So we have reached out to those families. Many of them have said yes, but haven't found the time to either complete the survey or I feel like they're definitely the depth of the questions asked is a lot for families to complete. And in terms of the time burden, the emotional burden. And so we're very grateful for the families that have participated, but it's certainly open to those who might be interested in participating in the future. We're hoping to go through and try to see if there's any more information that we can garner from what we've already received, and then also to try to get some of those missing pieces that we have from other families, as well as try to get in those last couple of genetic reports to confirm some of those variants before approaching publication. So that is the plan.
Excellent. If I could just add a little bit, just speaking of genetics and genetic variants, one of the sort of new initiatives that Autism BrainNet has engaged in terms of supporting research is conducting whole exome and whole genome sequencing for every single one of our donors. And all of that raw genetic data is being made available to researchers. And so we hope that, again, that appeals to the research community, and we can, as Megan, you're advocating, ingratiate more researchers.
Most definitely. Yeah, I think it would be great if we had some of those samples. For us, it's mostly just been what parents have been uploading and sharing. I know in the one case that there could potentially be additional testing for the one case that we know of that has donated. So hopefully that we'll be able to find out more in the future. So I don't see any more questions in the chat. Oh. Are there other patients with the same variants as any of the GRI angels? From the portal, it looks like yes. There were a couple of cases that I came across in the GRIN portal where it looked like that there were other cases that had been reported in the registry. That's not something that has been confirmed with the researchers that are involved in the registry yet, just based on the raw data that's available in the portal. So potentially, I mean, it could provide other information for families. But, as we noted, there is definitely, some challenges related to some of this information. Also, our goal isn't to scare families, but to empower families and make them feel aware of what's going on, and that there definitely could be unexpected circumstances and how to prepare for those as best we can. And obviously, our biggest goals are finding treatments and cures in order to prevent this from happening in the future. But yes, there have been other cases reported with similar variants. Okay. I don't. Okay. Denise noted that her son Brett, who has one of the same variants that has been reported by a GRICON, has had no issues with their heart, and that was one of the things noted as the cause of death for that particular patient. Okay. All right. Well, Carolyn, I want to thank you so much for sharing all the powerful information from Autism BrainNet. I want to thank everyone for their time and attention again. And thank you for honoring our GRIAngels and for being here, learning more about this difficult topic, and trying to provide more education for each other. And yeah, so thank you so much. And we hope you enjoy the rest of the day, hopefully some lighter topics in the afternoon. To be able to enjoy, and lots of different things out there to learn more about. So with that being said, we can close the session. You can take a break before heading to the next breakout, or you can hop in on the other session. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan.
Bye, everyone.